What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to GA Fan TV. I hope the form is good. I hope the form is well. So the Tailteann Cup is here, the 2023 Tailteann Cup. We know for certain now what the groups are going to be. We know for certain what teams are going to be in the Tailteann Cup. And of course, as always, like I did with the All-Ireland Championship, like I did with the Ladies Championship, the Hurling Championship, we are going to make some predictions some predictions based off of the draw and obviously based off of the teams that are in the Tailteann Cup. Now, of course, I would have sort of given a bit of a prediction earlier in the year in terms of the Tailteann Cup, but we didn't know for certain what sides were actually going to be participating in the Tailteann Cup. We didn't know for certain what teams were going to be in there. We obviously know that now for certain. And look, I mean, last year the Tailteann Cup was a bit of a revelation in terms of the attention that it got. You know, I think everyone was very excited for the Tailteann Cup last year, and I think it's a great initiative because at the end of the day, it's more games. It's more games for the lower level counties. And it gives them a chance to possibly get to Croke Park and possibly win a major trophy. And I know the likes of maybe big traditional counties like Meath and Down, who've had a history of winning All-Irelands and provincial titles, might maybe look down on it ever so slightly. But I think it's a great chance, even for Meath, you know, given the season that they had. What an opportunity in some way to put things right and actually end the season on a good note and get a day out in Croke Park and a big final, you know? So I think there is, there's a lot of interesting scenarios. I think the Tailteann Cup this year as well, in my opinion, I think is going to be a lot more open than last year. I think last year people looked at Westmeath and Cavan as the two serious favourites. I think there's certainly some favourites in this year's Tailteann Cup, but I don't think it's as straightforward as last year. And I think there's a lot of dark horses. And I think with the group stages as well, I think it will make it even that bit more interesting. So, yeah, we're here to preview and predict the 2023 Tailteann Cup. Let's do this. So let's take a look at the group stages then and remind ourselves. And what we will be doing is predicting, obviously, each group, predicting where each county is going to finish. And like a lot of my other predictions this year, I did do a mock draw, and we're basically going to base our predictions off of those individual games and obviously predict the winners, predict who I think is going to get to the final, the semi-finals, quarterfinals, absolutely everything. We'll be predicting my player of the competition and dark horse and top scorer. Why not? We'll go with those three predictions to be thrown in there as well. So this is the Wikipedia page for the 2023 Tailteann Cup, and you can see the teams who are in there. So I mean, look, some big counties, the likes of Meath, Down, are obviously in there. Cavan, of course, as well, who were beaten in the final last year. So looking at Group 1, you've got Cavan, Offaly, Laois and London. In Group 2, you've got Meath, Down, Tipperary and Waterford. And in Group 3, you've got Limerick, Wicklow, Longford and Carlow. Poses to be a very open group. I think the same with Group 4 actually as well. Fermanagh, Antrim, Wexford and Leitrim. And you can see the fixtures there as well. So obviously on the final day of the group stages will be when we will have neutral games or games in neutral stadiums, shall we say. Each side has a home game in there, and obviously each side will play in a neutral stadium as well. So let's start with Group 1 then. We've got Cavan, Offaly, Laois and London. I think it goes without saying I would predict both Cavan and Offaly to finish in the top two spaces. Actually, one thing we're pointing out, actually, before we continue, it will be the top three from each group. So much like the All-Ireland group stages, it will be the top three that will progress. The group winners will go automatically into the quarterfinals. And then the second place sides will play the best finished third place sides and New York. So unlike the All-Ireland group stages, there will be a team that finishes third and does not progress into the next stage of the Tailteann Cup. But that team will have essentially probably have finished on 0 points or 1 or 2 points because, it'll be the worst placed third place team, shall we say. So Group 1, Cavan, Offaly, Laois and London. In terms of first, I'm actually going to go for Offaly. And the reason being is I'm not too sure about Cavan. Like, I think Cavan went very strong throughout the league. They looked very, very good in the league. But towards the end of the league, there was a flatness about them. They obviously got beat by Fermanagh in the final day of the league season. They did get revenge and beat them in the in the following game, obviously in the league final. But then against Armagh, there was a flatness to them, and I just think Offaly pushed Louth very, very closely, and I think Offaly are building something. I think Keane Farrell being back into the side, Jack Bryant, obviously under 20 footballers, getting a lot more game time. Rory McNamee, I thought, was outstanding the other day as well versus Louth. And you even look at mainstays like Anton Sullivan and Bernard Allen. I think Offaly are onto something. And I think if Offaly can play with that same energy and intensity that they brought versus Louth, and obviously they beat Meath as well, let's not forget, I think they have a serious chance. And I think with that game versus Cavan being in a neutral stadium, I fancy Offaly to get the job done. And one thing I do think will happen is I think Offaly will rack up bigger wins versus London and Laois. And I think even if that game versus Cavan goes to a draw, I fancy Offaly to still win it on score difference. So I think Offaly will win the group. I do think it will be Cavan in second. Look, I was critical a little bit of Cavan there, but I think they will, they'll get the sort of cobwebs out of their system. I think Laois in the opening game poses to be maybe a bit of a sticky one, but I think at home, obviously in Breffni Park, Laois are just not a great team. Let's be perfectly honest. I know the likes of Sean Kavanagh was saying earlier in the year that realistically they're a Division 2 side. Completely disagree. I think obviously having the likes of Paul Kingston, Evan O'Carroll back in the team make a big difference. But Cavan should be far too strong for both Laois and London, and I would be hugely surprised if Cavan didn't pick up 4 points from both of those two matches. So yeah, I'll go with Cavan to get in the second position, and I will fancy Laois to get the job done versus London. I think both of those two sides will go into that final game on 0 points. I think London, to be fair, have been quite competitive at times, and you certainly wouldn't rule them out. I know they've had a couple of injuries, and obviously Enda Lynn's now back in the side, which is huge. It is an interesting one. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if Laois messed that one up, but would it been in a neutral stadium? I've no idea where that game is going to be played, actually, to be honest with you. Quite hard to find a neutral stadium for both Laois and London, in fairness. But I will go with Laois to finish in third, and I do think they'll be one of the better placed third place sides, because I think they will win. They will beat London, so I think they will progress. So we'll go Offaly first, Cavan second, and we will go Laois in third. Moving on to Group 2, it's another very interesting one. Meath, Down, Tipperary, and Waterford. I think this has the potential to be a very lopsided group, in the sense that I think Meath and Down are two of the stronger sides in this competition, and Tipperary and Waterford are arguably, two of the worst, or two of the weakest sides in this competition. Looking at it from a Meath perspective, I mean, that they need to start with a win versus Tipperary. If they don't beat Tipperary in that opening weekend, I mean, I think Colm O'Rourke needs to resign right there and then, to be perfectly honest with you. I know that sounds quite harsh, but I think, Meath are a county that should have much, much higher standards than what has been producing in the last couple of years. And yeah, it's an interesting one with Meath. I mean, I don't know if Shane Walsh will be back fit for this one. Like, they've got a great forward in Jordan Morris. I like Harry Hogan between the sticks. I think Ronan Jones on his day is a very good player. Like, I think Meath have the potential to go very far in this competition, but the worry I have for Meath is that when the going gets tough, when their backs are up against the wall, will they have what it takes to turn it around? Now, if you think back to the Cork game in the opening day of the league season, their backs were up against the wall. They fought back and they won. Against Clare, look, it wasn't a straightforward victory, and they had to work for that, but they did, and they got the victory. But since then, every time the goings got tough, Meath have just collapsed. And their start to games has been dreadful. I mean, their start versus Offaly was very poor. 2 points in the opening half. Against Dublin, Derry, I remember in the first half, they were basically non-existent. So I think it's huge for Meath to get a win, and get a big win as well, because this Tipperary side are not the same as what they were a couple of years ago. Conor Sweeney's injured. You don't have Michael Quinlivan, Colin O'Riordan, all those lads aren't in the Tipperary side anymore. Sean O'Connor is a decent player, but you would fancy Meath surely to get out of this group. I don't think they'll go up as group winners, though. I will go for Down to win the group. The only thing that worries me about Down is that will a lot of the Kilcoo lads commit to play in the Tailteann Cup? Because like if you remember the likes of Eugene Brannigan, Michal Rooney did play throughout the majority of the league, in fairness, but Ryan Johnston, these lads, like they didn't play throughout the majority of the league. And I think they came in towards the end of the league in preparation for doing something in the Ulster Championship. Will they all commit for the Tailteann Cup? That'll be interesting. But I think one thing we're pointed out is that Conor Laverty, like obviously the down under 20s had a very good year. I know they got beat there by Kildare a couple of weeks ago, but could a few of them obviously come into the side if the Kilcoo lads opt out? Like they still are great players anyway. Like the likes of Pat Havern's been in flying form. So I fancy Down to win the group. I think Meath and Down should both be beating Tipperary and Waterford. I think that goes without saying. And even if though the Meath Tipperary game is the only one I look at and think it might be somewhat close. It could maybe be less than 4 or 5, just with Meath sort of they're coming in quite wounded, and Tipperary might fancy it, but with it being a Navan, you would surely expect Meath to come through. But I think Down will get the better of Meath in the neutral game there. So we'll go Down first, Meath second. I am going to go Tipperary in third, but I do think Tipperary will be the least in terms of the third place sides. I think Tipperary will miss out, unfortunately. I think they will beat Waterford, but will it be enough in terms of it could go down to score difference with other sides, and you could see Tipperary racking up a bit of a negative score difference against Meath and Down. So we'll go Down first, Meath second, Tipperary third, and Waterford fourth. Moving on to Group 3 then, and this group is about as wide open as anything really, much like Group 4. I think you look at Group 1 and Group 2, and I think you can kind of guess who will be the top two. This one's not as self-explanatory. I think the side that will finish bottom and miss out, I think, will be Carlow. I can't really see them doing anything in any of those 3 matches. Unfortunately for Carlow, like they've shown some promise under Paul Carew at times, but I just don't really see. I think it's going to be tough for them, to be honest with you. And even looking at their fixtures as well, away to Wicklow, I can't see them getting anything there. It's actually the 3rd time they'll have played Wicklow this year. Interestingly enough, could they beat a wounded Limerick? I just don't see it. And then against Longford, final game, neutral stadium, I think Longford will definitely still be in the mix. So yeah, I think Carlow will miss out, unfortunately. I think the team I'll go for first is Wicklow. I think Wicklow are coming in very, very good form indeed. Like you remember, even against Kildare in the Leinster Championship, like it wasn't like they were absolutely blown to pieces or absolutely hammered. Like they were fairly competitive at times in that game. They were only 5 points down at half time. And I think Ushy McConville, like he is building something at Wicklow. I've said it openly before. I think Wicklow they're doing well at underage level. There's a couple of players making the breakthrough, the likes of Owen Darcy has really, stood out in the last couple of years, and a few others as well. So I think Wicklow will finish top. Not by much. I don't think they'll win every game. I think there will be, this is definitely a group that I think will go down to the wire on the final day. But I do think they will have enough to finish in first. In terms of Limerick and Longford for that second position, I mean, it's very, very tough. But, I fancy Longford. And it might be a bit of a surprise. I know they got relegated from Division 3. But I think Limerick are coming in wounded, having had a very disappointing Division 2 campaign. I know they still have good players. And, they obviously have a couple of injuries. Josh Ryan is injured. There'll be new management in place. It might be a bit of a different Limerick to the one we've seen in the league, but I just fancy Longford to turn them over in the Gaelic rounds. And I actually fancy Longford to finish in second. Maybe a bit of a surprise, but I think Limerick. I don't think Limerick will be quite at it, to be perfectly honest with you. So yeah, I fancy Longford. I know they are missing a couple of players, and they still have big Darren Gallagher in there. Rian Brady doesn't seem to be playing, but yeah, like I fancy Longford to finish in second, and that might be a bit of a surprise, but that's my prediction. Group 4 is another very tricky one to call, with Fermanagh, Antrim, Wexford, and Leitrim. I am going to go for Fermanagh to finish in first. I think they had a very strong league campaign. They obviously finished ahead of Cavan in the league stage, but obviously lost in that game in Croke Park. It's been, I suppose, 2 disappointing defeats in the last 2. Obviously losing to Cavan, like we mentioned, and getting beaten by Derry. But Derry are a top side. We've seen what they did to Monaghan. In fairness, I think Fermanagh are coming on leaps and bounds, and Ultan Kelm's been in extraordinary form. Darragh McGurn, we saw the goal he obviously scored against Cavan in Croke Park, and Sean Quigley, obviously, he was missing the last day versus Derry with a big injury. We'll see if he's if he's fit, if he's available for some of these games, you hope he would be. He's obviously not always started, but he is a huge player to bring off the bench or start. And he's usually the man who makes the difference on the day. So yeah, I think Fermanagh, I'll give Fermanagh the edge to finish in first. In terms of the second position, or after that, it's so hard to call, to be honest with you. I'm going to go for Leitrim, I think, to edge in second position, in my opinion, because I think Leitrim, like, obviously you're looking at that opening game away to Antrim, which is a little bit of a tricky one, in fairness, going away to Antrim. But I think after everything that happened with Leitrim in New York, I think they're going to want to put a lot of things right. And I think they do have good players. I think they do have good players in their side, in their team. Keith Byrne, as we've seen, on his day, I think he was the top scorer in the entirety of the National Football League. Tom Pryor is another good attacking player as well. Like, they do have good players, and I fancy them to just about edge it, in my opinion. Like, I think the fixtures here is going to be absolutely crucial, and you're looking at it. Leitrim versus it is tough for Leitrim because they're away to Antrim, home to Fermanagh, and away to Wexford. But I think they'll do the business away to Antrim. I think they'll just about have enough. And between them and Wexford, and obviously Antrim, there's a lot of interesting points. I think Wexford are the type of side that have a habit of pulling out big results every now and again, which is why I'm going to go with them to get into third. Obviously Ben Brosnan's been sort of a star player for them in the last couple of years. I mean, he's been around for the best part of a decade, in fairness. You never know what you're going to get with Wexford, but I just fancy them to sneak it, to be honest with you. Antrim is a strange one. Like, they've performed very well at times this year. I think they're lacking major threat up top, and they've put a lot into the league, and I think that might just catch up with them, in my opinion, in terms of avoiding relegation. So first I'll go with Fermanagh, second I'll go Leitrim, third I will go with Wexford, and unfortunately for Antrim, their season will end in the Tailteann Cup group stages. So we'll move on then to the preliminary quarterfinals. And as you can see, New York are obviously in there. So we did a bit of a mock draw, and this is what we came up with. So you'll see on screen there just a bit of a draw, just a bit of randomization on the Yale interweb. Obviously, you have to redo this draw a couple of times because certain teams can't play certain teams and everything else, which is why I don't do it live on screen, because I just have to start moving things around. But as you'll see there, Leitrim versus New York, that is actually what came up, which is quite bizarre, considering those two have a bit of history. Laois versus Meath, all Leinster clash there. Limerick versus Cavan, and Wexford versus Longford. As I said, Tipperary, I think, will finish in third, but will miss out, in my opinion. Leitrim versus New York, I'll go for Leitrim. I think they will get revenge at home as well. Maybe a bit of a hostile reception for the New Yorkers, and I think it's the perfect chance for Leitrim to exact revenge. What you would say, though, is if New York get that game, they'll be like, for God's sake, why have you given us Leitrim again? Why do we always get the Connacht sides? I know they played awfully last year, but versus Meath, I think I'll go for Meath. I'm actually not entirely sure where all these games are being played. I think the Leitrim one would be at home, I think. But I'm not entirely sure what neutral stadiums and everything else these games would actually be played in. But I'd go for Meath to get the better of Laois. I think it is a sticky one for Meath, and it's definitely a higher quality opposition than the likes of Tipperary, Waterford. But I just fancy Meath to ever so slightly edge it. I think they are still a good bit ahead of Laois, in fairness. They're not Division 4 standard Meath. I know they've had a very disappointing year, but I don't think they're as bad as that, in fairness. Limerick versus Cavan. I mean, look, out of all the games Cavan could have got, it's definitely a bit of a tricky one. But I do think they'll be too strong for Limerick. And I am going to go with Longford as well to beat Wexford. So Longford getting to a Tailteann Cup quarter final. Maybe this draw has been ever so slightly kind to them. But yeah, we'll go with Longford to come through there. In terms of the quarter final draw, this is what we came up with. So in my opinion, we have the two best teams in the competition drawing each other. Cavan against Down. Meath versus Offaly as well. I mean, you're talking about the sort of top four all drawing each other there. Longford versus Fermanagh, and Leitrim versus Wicklow. In terms of Cavan versus Down, like if Down have all the cool lads commit, and if they have the best available team to them, I think they're more than capable of turning over Cavan, in my opinion. I think they're more than capable of doing so. The thing that worries me, though, about Down is, again, as I said, I don't know if all those players are going to commit, and I do think Cavan, for as much as we say at times they do produce the odd stale performance and there isn't always a huge amount of consistency about them, Last year when we seen them in the Tailteann Cup, they were so consistent. You know, they had a couple of hairy moments, obviously against Sligo last year. To be fair to them, but I think Cavan were more than good enough to get. Obviously, they beat down along the way as well. Let's not forget. You know, I think Paddy Lynch on his day. You know what a top class forward he is. Gerard McKernan, the man in behind. I mean, he's sort of been a mainstay for this Cavan side in the last couple of years, and obviously the return of Darren McVeety as well, playing in at centre back. I think has a big influence. So I'll go with Cavan. I don't know where this game will be played. Is it a neutral stadium or where it is exactly played? I don't entirely know, but I will go for Cavan to edge it. Meath versus Offaly is a really interesting one. It obviously throws up another game that has history, and obviously these two played each other in the Leinster Championship. And look, I mean, could it happen again? Like Offaly beat them convincingly. Let's not forget. You know, it wasn't like they just nicked it. Like they absolutely wiped the floor with them. But I'm gonna back Meath, and it's a prediction that I don't know. Part of me feels like I might being a bit too. I don't know. Like maybe maybe I might change my mind there. Am I being a bit too kind to me? Like I do think they have good players in Jordan Morris, in Ronan Jones, and I think confidence is the big thing with Meath. And I think if they'll have had a couple of wins on the bounce now. They'll have beaten the likes of Tipperary and Waterford. They'll have beaten Laois, as I said in the preliminary game. Like I think, I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a very tough one, and I'm certainly second guessing myself here. Do I actually go and back them? Do I have faith in them? Do you know what? I don't. I actually don't. I think Offaly, I need to give them the credit that they deserve. They were more than capable of beating Louth a couple of weeks ago, very close to doing so. Comprehensively beat Meath as well. I'm going to go with Offaly. I think they'll deliver the final nail in Meath's coffin, and you know they knocked them out of the Leinster Championship. Now I think they'll knock them out of the Tailteann Cup as well. Leitrim versus Wicklow, two sides familiar with each other as well from Division 4, but I will go with Wicklow to edge that one, in my opinion. I think Ushie McConville definitely building something, and I do think Wicklow are just that bit ahead of Leitrim right now. And Longford versus Fermanagh obviously played each other at the start of the league as well. All these sides somewhat familiar with each other, but they are in and around the same division, to be fair. I will go with Fermanagh to end, I suppose, Longford's journey. So the semi-final draw has thrown up Offaly versus Wicklow and Cavan versus Fermanagh. What a story it would be if Wicklow could go and reach the Tailteann Cup final. That would be absolutely extraordinary. But I don't quite see it happening. I fancy Offaly, you know, the confidence that they'll have of obviously beating Meath once again. And I think as well, you know, they have experience of playing in Croke Park now, you know, a bit of experience, you know, Division 3 final a couple of years ago against Derry. They obviously played, you know, recently against Louth, Tailteann Cup semi-finals last year. A lot of the under-20s would have played there in the final a couple of years ago against Roscommon. So I think they will have too much for Wicklow, in my opinion. And Cavan versus Fermanagh throws up a repeat of the Division 3 final in the league, and I fancy Cavan again to just be too strong for Fermanagh. So Cavan versus Offaly in the Tailteann Cup final. And as I said before, like obviously I've done a bit of a mock draw here just for a bit of crack, just for a bit of a laugh. I do think the best two teams in this competition are Cavan and Down. And then after that, I would look at Meath and Offaly as two sides that I think have a serious chance. I think Fermanagh as well, in fairness, are certainly not a million miles off. But yeah, like in terms of this final, Cavan versus Offaly, like, look, Offaly would be tough for Cavan. You know, I think they would cause Cavan a lot of defensive problems. But I just think I think the fact that Cavan lost that final last year to Westmeath, to lose it again would be serious heartbreak. And I think Mickey Graham will look at this and think, I know they're obviously in Division 2 next year, but Division 2 will be tough for them next year. It'll be a tough division in there, and it's not a guarantee that they survive. But I think they'll be looking at it and thinking, you know, if we win this Tailteann Cup, that's a Samagora place wrapped up for next season. And, you know, like out of all the sides in the Tailteann Cup this year, they're definitely the team with the most experience of coming through some of these games. They've played, you know, almost every side in Division 3 and 4 because they were a Division 4 side last year. They have the knack of beating all of them. You know, they've played Offaly at certain stages. They've played Fermanagh. They've played, you know, they have the knack. They know more about these sides than anyone else. And I think Cavan will be too strong. I think forwards-wise, in terms of keeping the ball, physicality around midfield, I think they will just be a bit too strong. I think Offaly have all the potential of doing something. And I think what a story it would be for Offaly to go and win this competition just a couple of months after, obviously, the tragic death of their manager and Liam Kearns. I mean, what a tribute it would be if Offaly could go and get the job done. But I fancy Cavan to go and win the Tailteann Cup. And I think one thing I would say is, obviously, as I said, it is a bit of a mock draw. It is a bit of crack and everything else. I think Cavan are the strongest team in this competition. And I think regardless of who they face and regardless of where the games are being played, they should still have enough. I think they have the quality and the players to do so. The thing that worries me is the odd stale performance here and there. And sometimes they have a habit of making games that should be, comfortable game. They turn comfortable games into more dramatic games at times, like the Sligo game, for example, last year. But yeah, I fancy Cavan to do it. I fancy Cavan to win the Tailteann Cup. So we'll run through some predictions in terms of player of the tournament, dark horses, and in terms of, I suppose, top scorer. So I suppose in terms of dark horses, I mean, I've got Wicklow to reach a semi-final here. I think they are a serious dark horse. I think Ushie McConville has got them very well set up. And, I think when it gets to Croke Park, that will be the difficulty for them. But I think outside of Croke Park, I think they could cause a couple of surprises. In fairness, player of the competition is a difficult one. I think I might give it to Keane Farrell. I think he looked very good towards the end of the league for Offaly. I thought he had a great game versus Louth. And I fancy him to have a big season in this competition from an Offaly perspective. And top scorer, I mean, it's a tough one, isn't it? Because you're looking at it in terms of who's taking frees and everything else. I think I'll go with Paddy Lynch to be top scorer there, maybe. Although he hasn't always been the most consistent in the world there. But yeah, we'll go with Paddy Lynch as the top scorer. So there we have it then, the 2023 Tailteann Cup predictions, my Tailteann Cup predictions. Obviously, bear in mind, these are my predictions, but if you do disagree, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, let me know. Who do you think will be the winners? Who do you think will be the dark horses? What sides do you look at and think there could be a surprise or whatever? But I fancy Cavan to go and do it. And look, Offaly, I think, could have a big season. Still wouldn't rule out Meath, to be honest with you. I think if they can click into gear, they have a serious chance. But I think all is not right with Meath right now, and I think to win this competition, you do need to have a bit of stability and everything else. And Meath just do not have that right now, which is why I cannot back them, to be honest with you. And I think they're when the going will get tough for them, and it will happen at some point during this competition, will they have the mental fortitude to come through it? I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, I'm going to go for Cavan to get the job done and win the competition. Let me know your opinions in the comments down below. My name is Aaron. Like, subscribe if you enjoy this content. I'll see you all later.